It is always interesting to me to learn the reason behind all sorts of things. For example, while it is pretty easy to guess why Chicago is called the Windy City and Detroit is called Motor City, why is New York known as the Big Apple and New Orleans called the Big Easy? Some attribute the New York name to a notation in 1909 by journalist Edward Martin in his book, The Wayfarer in New York, that Midwesterners are likely see New York as a greedy city since the Big Apple gets a disproportionate share of the national sap. However, the prevailing explanation comes from a horse racing publication in which John J. Fitzgerald, racing journalist, noted about racing that the dream of every lad that ever threw a leg over a thoroughbred and the goal of all horsemen. There's only one Big Apple. That's New York. He had actually overheard two New Orleans stable hands discussing the New York racing being the goal of every aspiring jockey and trainer because it was a supreme opportunity, like an attractive big red apple. The origin of the Big Easy for New Orleans is still a bit obscure, but one suggestion is that it is a comparison of the way of life in New Orleans to life in the Big Apple, New York, the city that never sleeps. Another theory places the name origin within the city's well-recognized musical heritage. With its vast number of performance venues, where in the early 20th century, struggling musicians could easily find places to make a living while plying their trade. The Big Easy is essentially a synonym for the spirit within the city, as the people there can do things their way without fear of being judged. When trying to determine who was actually the first to invent something, it can be interesting because through improvements to the original item, we finally get to the mechanisms we are familiar with today. One example of this is the invention of the steam engine, which according to Britannica it was Tom Savery, a British engineer who in 1698 patented his invention using pressurized steam. Then in 1712 this device was improved upon by Thomas Newcomen, who with the help of John Calley built his engine on top of a water-filled mine shaft using atmospheric pressure to remove the water below. Then in 1769, James Watt patented the majorly improved steam engine that helped to bring about the Industrial Revolution. And then there is the computer for which Charles Babbage, an English engineer, is credited with having the first concept of a computer that could be programmed to carry out many chores then accomplished by humans, but that would be able to do the job more efficiently and faster. In 1823, he enlisted engineer John Clement to build what he called his difference machine, one that would make complex mathematical calculations by repeated addition without using multiplication or division. But by 1833, the two agreed to disagree and parted company. By then, though, Babbage had a greater idea for a machine that he named the analytical engine and recorded his notes and sketches of about 5,000 pages for a device that could do more complex mathematical chores, including multiplication and division. Those sketches and notes of the parts resemble those of which today's computers are comprised. Unfortunately, Babbage died before he could get very far into the production of his idea, and it wasn't until 1942 that Dr. John Vincent Atanasoff, along with Clifford Berry, his graduate student, actually created the Atanasoff-Berry electronic computer. It can be mind-boggling when one thinks about how far back these ideas were being bandied about, but even earlier than it has been shown that others had similar ideas, but just lacked the wherewithal to be able to build such machines. In fact, it was mathematician and engineer Heron of Alexandria, who lived during the 1st century, who was first to conceive of an idea for a steam engine he called the Aeolipile. And Leonardo da Vinci, during the 15th century, drew his designs for a steam-powered cannon he called the Architonere. So as far as computers are concerned, in 1901, an ancient Greek device called the Antikythera mechanism, which calculated and displayed astronomical phenomenon, was recovered from a trading ship that had sunk during the first half of the 1st century BC near the island of Antikythera in the Mediterranean Sea. It has been speculated that when the device was whole, it would have fit in a shoebox, and the faces of the mechanism covered with Greek inscriptions, there was enough to clearly indicate the device's astronomical or calendrical purpose. And thus ends this compilation of informational tidbits, at least for today.
Pat Farrell is a senior contributing writer with the RE Newsline.